and one entire camera was wasted because the guy hadn't thought through the edit, and none of the shots were usable because they just didn't make sense in the edit.
Yeah.
It's the only reason I'm even actually aware of it myself.
Okay.
Just talk a little bit amongst yourselves, or so.
So the reason why this came about was
Yeah.
I absolutely loved your book.
Okay, cool.
I thought it was the best thing I've read in a long time, actually.
Right.
And I'll do a bit like my. Well, first of all, I loved the way that it was.
Okay, hold on. Just say that over again before you forget it. Okay, right. I'm going to roll the cameras because that was just a test on the audio. So
yeah, okay. So yeah, I'm really feeling very privileged now to be with you, talking to you right now, Michael, because and it came out of a moment where I got your book almost as the moment you came over to start to publicise it, and read it like a shot, wanted to reread it immediately, and I kind of loved it. It was really connected with it. And I'll do a little bit with, as my great-grandfather would have done, which is to start at the end, because the piece that really inspired me was the last chapters about enlightenment and how to live your life differently.
Yeah.
And that's a piece that I personally hadn't heard from anybody else. So maybe you'd like to just, is that the space where miracles happen?
Well, for me, the space where miracles happen is what people start to discover when their thinking gets quieter. When they start to look in the direction of these principles that I talk about in the book. And it's almost everybody at some point falls into that space. And in the principles community we call it mind. But it's you can think of it as the state of meditation, but it's a natural space. It's not a I'm going to get into this space, I'm going to get, you know, it's not, you fall into it because it's actually home, it's your nature.
Okay.
Now, out of that space, it's possible to take a fresh look at life. And so the later chapters, sort of, I think of the book as being in 3 parts. Yes. I think it is literally in 3 parts, actually.
Yes.
But I think of it as being in 3 parts, where the first part is the foundation.
Yep.
It's the understanding of the principles and how our experience gets created. The middle part is sort of looking at, well, what are the implications of that for how we make sense of the world? And it talks a lot about wisdom and insight and grace. And then the third part is, what are the implications of that for how we might go live our lives? And I think the reason that you probably haven't seen the third part before is it's just my thoughts. It's not, you know, and I always think it's important to say, it's not, if you know these 3 principles, you will live like this. It's just, it's occurred to me, given what I understand about how life works, it makes a lot more sense to me to live like this. And I kind of hope I do a reasonable job of kind of making it non-prescriptive, where people don't think, oh, okay, so I've got to do this, and I shouldn't do this. And you know, for me, this is a description of how life works. And then it's just an exploration of what that might suggest for what's possible, which is a lot more than people think.
Yeah, no, I think that piece, is it something you said about, a sentence that really struck me was, it's not the absence of thought, it's the presence of mind.
Yeah.
And I really love that, because I've been understanding the principles now for a little while, and you do tend to get focused on no thinking, less thinking. Yeah,
thought becomes sort of this bad guy, and you're trying to conquer thought, like meditation, or, you know, and
or even just, once I've got rid of this thinking, I'll be fine.
Yeah. And it just becomes stress reduction 101 then. It's not really at that level that different to a lot of other things. It's when what comes into that space, you know, the presence of mind, that British examples, American examples, and broken it up. Here we just kind of went, everyone reads it online anyway, so, you know.
Right, good to go again. Sorry about that.
Where do you want to pick up? Just with a fresh question, or?
Yeah, well, he was trying to remember what it was. That's why I thought there was time to stop.
There was an editor's friend in there anyway. So, You just mentioned something really interesting, which was kind of like, we were talking about the journey of understanding, of moving towards understanding that everything works this way. Tell me about that journey. How was that journey for you, Michael?
How was that journey for me? It was mostly lovely and sometimes icky. in that it's very different, because it's more like describing a journey down a river than a hiking trip. So there's not, like in a hiking trip, yes, there's the trail, but a lot of it's down to you. And in this, really all that's down to you is staying in the boat. You know, you do have to stay in the boat. Like, you do have to stay in the game. You do have to stay in the conversation. But other than that, it's an unfolding. So it's like the wisdom of mind, this deeper intelligence that's part of our nature, that unfolds it to you. But you do have to keep listening. So in a way, you're absolutely involved in the process, but there's just nothing to do. And that, for a long time, I kept trying to do something with it.
Okay.
Like, okay, well, how do I get this more? How do I get better at this? Or for the longest time, when I was first learning, it was like, well, how do I use this to create the miracles that you guys are creating? And it was, I actually went up to Le Connor to spend some time with George and Keith and Linda, and I went up absolutely with the intention, I'm going to model what they do. I'm going to NLP it. I'm going to figure out the strategies, the underlying beliefs, and I'm going to create the model and teach this therapy make it accessible to the masses, kind of thing. And when I came back from there, my friend who's doing NLP with me said, "Well, did you get it?" And I said to him, I said, "I'm so sorry, I drank the Kool-Aid." Because I just had seen something, and I didn't expect there to be anything to see. And that's what's so different, is people ask me now, why do you think this works so well? Why do you think this is so life-changing? And I say, because it's true. And you don't even have to be that good at pointing to the truth, because it's really there. As long as somebody looks, they'll see it. And in a way, our job, those of us who try to have this conversation with other people, is just to keep them in the conversation and keep them looking in that direction. When everything else in life is telling you, no, you need to look at your circumstances, you need to look at your habits, you need to look at your behavior, you need to look at the specifics of your thinking and change this thought for that thought. And to actually just keep going to people, no, you don't have to look at any of that. Look for what's true. Look for where your experience is coming from. Look for this deeper intelligence, this source. That's going to look for a feeling. That's going to carry you. That's going to give you everything that you need.
And how do those feelings guide you in that process? Are they the oar in your, are they steering oar in your canoe, or is there no steering to do?
Well, in the sense of the unfolding of the learning, I don't think there is any steering to do. You follow your nose, you follow your gut, you follow what interests you. Your wisdom will guide you on this journey. So you could say it's the oar, but I'm not convinced that it isn't also the river.
Okay.
I just think it. In a funny way, once you get past the idea that it's your job to figure it out, it's really a relaxing way to learn, because there really isn't anything to do. And I no matter how many times I say that, I know, because I was there. I was like, okay, so step 1, don't do anything. Step 2, and then you want to know, well, how do I not do anything? And I think the other thing is, people get confused when they hear that and they think, oh, so I'm not supposed to do anything, and they sit. And it's not a behavioral injunction. It's actually just a recognition of anything that you do to quiet the mind makes the mind noisy. I use I don't actually even know if this analogy is in the book, but I sometimes use the analogy of wisdom being like writing at the bottom of a swimming pool. So it'd be like, the answer to your question is written at the bottom of the swimming pool. Now, if you dive in to try to find the answer, you're not going to see anything.
Right.
You actually have to kind of just stand by the pool, let the water settle, and then it's there. In fact, it's magnified by the water. And it's like that. When the mind gets reflective, when the mind gets still, the wisdom's already there. But, you know, trying to do something to quiet the mind is like diving into the swimming pool to still the water.
Okay.
It doesn't work that way.
Okay. And so one of the things I really love about, well, two things that you said that I really love. One of them is that I've seen you talk about this before, and even today I'm getting the same sense from you, is like 100% absolute certainty that this is the truth. And that sense of trust seems to me to be hugely powerful.
I'm tempted to say it's everything. I don't know that I'm right. Like, I don't know that it really is everything. But the trust, I always say to people when they say, well, it sounds like faith. Well, it's a kind of faith, but it's not a blind faith. Like, I have a certain amount of faith that the sun's going to come up in the morning. You could say I have certainty that the sun's going to come up in the morning. Because it always has. Now, of course, it's possible one day it won't.
Yeah.
Well, I've got that same kind of faith that thought creates feeling, because it always does. I've got that same kind of faith that that deeper intelligence is available, because it always has been. Now, might one day my thought not create feeling and there not be a deeper wisdom? I suppose it's possible. But I have a certain degree of educated faith.
Right.
That the sun's going to come out tomorrow and I will have fresh thought and new ideas, and in the meantime my thoughts will create feelings and I will ride that as best I can.
And so what we're about at Stars of Wellbeing is to get this out to a wider and wider audience, the stuff that we do. And earlier you said about, you know, to get something out to the common man, as it were, not wishing to be denigrating because they're all great people. And how do you?
Well, we're all the common man.
Exactly.
That's kind of the point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it seems to me at the moment that this is a fairly little known thing.
I was shocked because I had worked, I'd managed 2 bookshops in London, you know, psychology bookshop and a New Age bookshop, so I'd read a lot of what was out there in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
I had studied, probably, I honestly think I had read as much or more than almost anybody in the field. And I had never, ever, ever come across this, even with my 20 years or so in the field. And so, yeah, they did an amazing job of keeping it a secret.
And how easy do you think it's going to be accessible to everybody in the world? I mean, your book does a great job of making it accessible.
It's going to be interesting to find out. I think what we're up against that's real is a culture that continually tells us, and has done for thousands of years, it's not a fault of modern life, that the world works from the outside in, that our feelings come from our circumstances, and that we're, to differing degrees depending on your culture, either that we're on our own, or there's a judgmental being who decides whether or not you're allowed to have well-being and things like that.
Right.
And then in the last couple hundred years, it's been, well, no, the well-being piece, that's psychology, that's the domain of the mind, and if your mother did this, or your father did this, or you did this, you're up against that. And, you know, the sort of psychological boogeymen. And so that's the only thing that we're up against in terms of people are used to thinking of it that way. What we have on our side, our secret weapon, is we're telling the truth. And so, like I say, it's a heck of a secret weapon. Because I know that if somebody really looks, they're really going to see it. Because it's there. Right? I forget who I first heard this analogy from. I think it was Sandy Croft. A great analogy about bird watching. And she said, if there's a bird in the tree, and I want you to see it, all I have to do is keep pointing, and at some point it's pretty inevitable you're going to see it.
Sure.
And for me, this is like this. There is a bird in the tree. There is a truth behind the human experience. And if enough of us point to it in enough different ways, people will see it. And it doesn't matter that everyone else is going, there's no bird in the tree, don't look at that tree, look over there. It's innocent. I mean, nobody's trying to stop you from looking. But they really don't think there's a bird in the tree. They really think, oh, that's a waste. I looked for that bird once. It's not there.
Yep.
You know, the blue bird of happiness. You know, it's you know, the best you can get is this.
Yep.
And it's, you know, even that idea is not new. Plato's cave, right? That was, you know, Socrates' analogy was everyone's looking at the shadows and trying to make sense of life based on a reflection, an image. And if they would turn the other way, they would experience freedom.
So it's back to that separateness you were talking about earlier. That's the kind of the illusion, I think, is what you're saying. Is that, am I putting words in your mouth to say that?
Yeah, but I like them.
Oh, good.
No, I mean, I think there is a oneness to life, from what I can tell, and from what the physicists say, and from what the mystics say. I mean, nobody really disagrees about that. I find that interesting. I used to think that, when I was first learning about this, oh, you know what, this is spiritual. I can only talk to certain people about this. I found myself to be wrong again and again and again about that. I have really yet to talk to, I've talked to one person, literally, who couldn't see at least some of this. And they were so violently against anything that even sounded like it. And I wonder now if maybe I could talk to them about it, because I see it more clearly.
Okay.
You know, so I mean, you know, atheists, Jehovah's Witnesses, Jewish people, Muslims, Christians, I mean, Hindus. I mean, I've literally, you know, I've taught people personally from over 30 countries, and from, I've not counted religions, but every religion I've come across, including atheism. And nobody doesn't accept, at least at the basic element, that we're not in charge, that we're not the predominant creative force in the universe. And just seeing that that actually matters, and seeing that thought is that missing link, that thought is the thing that creates experience. It changes people's lives to see that.
Mm.
And in a really gentle way, usually. Sometimes like a slap in the face, but usually really gently. People just start to feel better. And things that seemed like, when I was first learning, I do tell this story in the book, you know, I was experiencing results with clients, and I've been working with NLP for 15 years, yeah, very successfully. Yeah. But I was getting results in my private practice I had never dreamt of. And I went to one of my mentors and I said, I don't get it. I'm not doing anything. I'm just talking to people about these principles, about the inside-out nature of experience. Why would that make these lifelong problems or 20-year problems disappear? And I loved her answer. She said, because they were never really there in the first place. So it's a different kind of a magic trick to make a shadow disappear than to make an actual solid object disappear. And our problems look like solid objects, but they turn out to be shadows.
The illusion.
The illusion.
Cool.
Yeah.
And the other thing that comes out of that for me, and maybe you can talk to this,
yeah,
is there seems to be a huge sense of hopefulness that comes out of the principles.
Yeah. I don't know if you've read the Lord of the Rings books,
yeah,
but one of the things I love in the Lord of the Rings books is that evil is personified in the books by a loss of hope. So what the forces of evil do is they take away hope. And good, white magic, is giving hope.
Yeah.
And I think that there is a lot of white magic here, in the sense that there's something incredibly hopeful about realizing we're part of this infinite potential. We're one thought away from well-being, no matter what we've been through, no matter what we're going through. We're one thought away. That's incredible to me, and it makes it a lot easier to sit with somebody who doesn't get it, who doesn't get it, who doesn't get it, and say it for the 19th time. It makes it easier for me to say, read the book again. Read one of Sid Banks's books again. Because I don't know what's going to trigger it. I mean, to be honest, they might have just as much luck driving behind a beer truck, right? Because what they're going to see is going to come up from inside them.
Yeah.
But when they see it, it's done. That bit's done. And then there's more to see, and then there's more to see.
Right, so it's never a kind of, there's never a binary answer, is there? There's kind of, you see it a bit more clearly and then a bit more clearly.
Yeah, and sometimes you have these huge leaps in consciousness and you suddenly get a whole bunch of stuff clear. And more often than not, it's like, oh yeah, this bit's a bit, I get this a bit more, I see this a bit more, oh that was a cute insight. And then I was saying at the conference, I think, you get the two big ones, which are the Charlton Heston, oh my God, insights, and then you get the Homer Simpson, I think it was Keith Blevins who used to call it flathead therapy, because you come in and you're going, oh, but they're both great.
Yeah.
I remember saying in a talk, I think it was last year at the conference, how you can explain all human behavior in two phrases, and why does anyone do anything? Because it seemed like a good idea at the time.
Sure.
And for me, what shows that people intuitively sense the truth of thought as the creative force is that when you look back and you feel like an idiot for what you were doing, you always say, what was I thinking? And we recognize, yeah, it seemed real in our thoughts. I mean, that's, I don't know, would it be okay if I go into a little bit
Sure.
the principles? Because
Sure.
I just think, if you haven't read the book yet, then what am I talking about?
No, a lot of these people won't have, so go
Yeah,
ahead.
well, for God's sake, go out and get it.
Yeah, I agree.
But
Go buy the book.
in the meantime, there's really two things. So we talk about three principles, and the fundamental principle, there's no real sequence to them. They're kind of all the same, very different, like three different angles on the same thing.
Yeah.
But is what we call the principle of mind, and what I call in the book the God principle. And it's just that there is a universal intelligent energy behind life. That's as far as you need to go with it. You don't need to decide what it is, where it comes from. There is an energy, an unfolding that we are a part of, that was working before we showed up and will continue to work after we go. And we can see it in our body. We can see the intelligence behind the body. We can see it in nature, the incredible intelligence behind nature. We tend not to notice that it's behind the mind, and it shows up in the mind as wisdom. And we tend not to notice that it's behind all life.
I think I could give you some examples of where, for example, with my first child, the daughter,
Yeah.
we tried for years to have a child, and then the moment we gave up was when we conceived her. And to me, that was that there's something bigger than me, and I should trust to that some more.
Yeah.
Looking back on it, it seems obvious.
Well, or at the very least, you may as well do.
Yeah.
Because your best efforts, have gotten you where you are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I think there's a lot of comfort and peace in being able to rely on that, to realize that's like an invisible safety net. You really can rely on that.
Mm.
Consciousness, the capacity to experience life, right? We take that as a given. I mean, it seems so, well, of course I can experience life. Well, why? Why do we get to experience life? I don't know, but that's a gift. That is a capacity. I talk about it sometimes like the developing fluid for film. It's the boiling water that you put the tea bag in.
Okay.
It's the shining light that you put film in front of. In and of itself, it isn't anything. It's just pure white light. It's just pure clear water. But as soon as you put something in it, it brings it to life. Mm. And so what it brings to life is thought. So thought would be the film, thought would be the tea bag, thought would be, whatever it is that comes to life.
Yeah.
And that's any life experience that you're having is being created from the inside out via these three principles. The energy and intelligence of life is kind of powering the system. And then thought and consciousness create our experience. And that's it. And it turns out that seeing that is hugely, it seems like no big deal. Yeah, okay. Most people don't really even argue with that. They go, yeah, I see the logic of that. But what they don't see, I have a test, which I can't use the language that I would normally use for it.
Sure.
But I'll call it the, what shall I translate it to? The holy freaking mother of God test. Let's call it that. Which is that if somebody hears this and doesn't go, holy freaking mother of God, they haven't really got it. Because seeing the logic of it and feeling the impact of it are two very different things. There is a logic to it. And I think it's powerful to see that there's a logic to it. But when you actually start to glimpse, oh my gosh, it's all made up. I've been making it all up.
Right.
And then reacting to it as if it's real and trying to fix it as if it's real. And you know, or I've been trying to do it all myself and I've been trying to work it out, and all the time, the while there's this, again, I don't think this analogy made the book, but sometimes use the analogy of walking along a path with a huge giant behind you. And there's this big boulder blocking the path. So what most of us do is we using our strength, and we'll use our intellect, we'll use leverage. So we'll get a lever and we'll move the rock, and we'll manage to move the rock like this much, but just enough. We squeeze through, and we have such a sense of accomplishment and ego and heroism. All we actually needed to do was ask the giant to do that. And that's this incredible resource of mind that's always available to us. But we forget, or we don't know, or we haven't made use of it enough. We haven't seen it enough to rely on it. And once we start to rely on it more and more, life gets so much more effortless. Because we're not trying to do things that are being done already. You know, the thought-feeling piece. When I start to see, oh my gosh, this is all made up. I mean, I remember for me, one of the first ones I saw was we got invited to a Grammys party. I live in Hollywood.
Sure.
And I was like, oh, I'm shy, you see.
Can't believe that.
Well, I could, right? I did for years and years and years. And I thought it was a real effort. I could get up on stage and prance about, but boy, then I needed to go hide, right? Because I was shy. And I even said to my publisher after my first book, I said, put any microphone in front of me and I'll talk to it, but I will not go to a book launch party because I'm shy, right? Well, it suddenly dawned on me. I'd been studying the principles, and I thought, it's a funny idea. I wonder, what if I wasn't shy? Like, surely that's just an idea. That's just thought. And I went to the Grammys party and I had a great time because I wasn't sitting there going to the party fighting against this reality of shyness. And and it was sort of a shock, and I started seeing that everywhere. That it's all made up. Now, I'm not saying you can go in and will yourself out of it, because as long as it looks real to you, if you think, well, I'm really shy, so what do I need to think to not be shy? It wasn't that. It was, I just saw that, well, that's made up. I'm not shy. Sometimes I act shy, sometimes I don't. But once I make up the identity of shy, I then discount all the times where I'm not shy and go, well, I don't know what that was. That was really, trust me, I'm shy.
I must have had something to drink.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's the other thing we do. We attribute it to something outside ourselves. And that's the only reason I stopped doing techniques with people, is because I saw that even the slightest technique was like, it's like if you and I know that our kids can naturally float, right? I'm not saying do this at home, kids, but we might throw them in the pool, knowing we're there, but knowing that they're going to actually rise to the surface. If we put even one thing for them to grab onto in the pool, they're going to grab onto it.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. If you give people well, maybe it's this great technique, or maybe it's me, maybe it's just hanging out with me that lets you feel this good. Maybe it's the drink, maybe it's the food, maybe it's the drug, maybe it's the sex, maybe it's whatever it is, they will grab onto it.
My kids were exactly like what you described. Yeah. My son would just run to the side, jump in and start kicking. Yeah. He'd be gone. My daughter would climb down the ladder, hold on to the side for grim death. The side was safe. Yeah. And she didn't realise that she'd forgotten that she could float, naturally float.
Yeah, and that's why it's really interesting. They certainly in the States, they teach babies to swim, because a baby doesn't yet have the thought that they can't. And they've got this amazing videos of these kids under the age of 1 swimming. And it's actually considered a safety issue, that it's, if you can show them that early.
I just remember all the other parents around the pool, the moment my son dived in, would be going, what's he doing? It's like, no, he's fine. He'll be fine. And
I think that's the other misnomers. I think if you've and I'm going to assume that a lot of people in Stories of Wellbeing have spent a lot of time studying personal development or self-help in one form or another.
Right.
And one of the things that makes that problematic, and boy, I'm talking from personal experience, is that it really looks like that's helped. Okay, it hasn't helped as much as I'd hoped, it hasn't helped as much as I want, but I'm on to something. And so for people like us to come along now and go, actually, that's getting in the way. The idea that you need to remember this, practice this, do this, that's actually what's slowing you down. It sounds oxymoronic, and like, well, that can't be true. I know better. But what happens, and it happens every time, is when you do experience a breakthrough, when you do experience a huge insight, it's because you let go of the old thought for a moment. You know, for me, one of the reasons that I studied and practiced NLP for so long, and I learned a lot and had an amazing experience, and I know that a lot of people have been helped by that work, but it came from one insight where I was reading a book, and it said, turn down the volume on the voice inside your head. And it got quiet. And I felt well-being for the first time in my adult life. I said, you know, I've been a depressed, suicidal teen. And because I thought it was the NLP, I threw myself in. I became, you know, a leading trainer, a leading practitioner, because it really looked to me like that's what had done it. Boy, that technique did it. What other techniques can I learn?
Okay.
What other techniques can I do? There's a comedy to me that if that happened to me now, and I recognized that that was just my natural state of well-being, I don't know what I would have done for those 15 years, but I would have had more free time.
But do you find that, so you, coming back to your journey, you know, do you find that there was, you talk about when you let go of the thought, did you have resistance? Did you find it difficult to let go? Because you obviously were a very successful, have been and are a very successful coach.
Honestly, no, because there wasn't anything left to hold on to. Like I had thinking about it. I mean, I was about to go on a book tour, promoting a book, telling people about how to use their thoughts to create well-being. But I just saw, well, but it doesn't work that way. And so I couldn't keep teaching that. You know, it's not harmful, I don't think, that people think that. And I've gotten, you know, look, I know that book has saved lives. I've gotten emails and letters from people. And I also know that idea that I needed to do it, that if I didn't take my behavioral Prozac, as I called it, every day, I was 2 weeks away from black depression and suicide.
Ah.
Now, I wasn't, funnily enough, I wasn't that worried about it because I knew I wouldn't stop taking it.
Right.
I knew I wouldn't stop practicing. But it was kind of wild when I suddenly saw I didn't have to, and that there was actually something that would pick me up. And I just had never let go long enough for it to come into play. I always remember this. I haven't used this analogy in this context, but years ago, Nina and I have been together 25 years now, and in the first few years, we had the usual teething issues of a couple. And one was that I never cleaned, and that I didn't care about the house, and I thought she was probably right. You know, I wasn't proud of it, but I never seemed to want to clean. You know. And then she went away for a few years in, for the first time where she went away for a week, and about 3 days in, I kind of noticed myself cleaning the house. I thought, oh, and she'd never left it more than a day. So it had never got to the point where it occurred to me that it needed cleaning. Right. Well, in a funny way, it's the same thing. If we've learned to be on our thoughts, on our moods, ooh, okay, what are my moods? And no, you know, I got to control it. The reason you don't recognize that there's a self-correcting mechanism is because you've never left it alone long enough to self-correct. Now that's not everybody's experience, but a lot of people who've spent a lot of time in self-help, that's what I see. And they have had maybe a time in their past where they got caught up in thought, and they got depressed, or they got anxious and had anxiety attacks, and they're so worried about that happening again that they've been on it ever since. And I wouldn't say to somebody, you know, you should let it go, because that sounds irresponsible. But what I can tell you, what I can tell anyone is, as you start to see how this works, as you start to see that you're only ever living in the feeling of your thinking, you will wind up letting it go at some point, because it just won't make sense to hang on to it.
And so different people do it at different, everybody does it differently, different speeds, different ways.
Yeah, I like the analogy, can't remember who had it today, somebody in the conference today used the analogy of popcorn.
Huh.
That like, learning the principles is like applying heat to popcorn.
Okay.
Not every kernel pops the same. Some pop really early, some pop really late, some don't pop till you take it off the stove. You know, some don't seem to pop until the next time you put them in. And so it has its own timing. But if I know that the nature of the kernel is a popped piece of corn,
yep,
it's easy to keep going. You know, even if every now and again I go, why won't this one pop?
So there's lots of things that I get from what you've been saying.
Yeah.
First of all, I find your your complete trust in the principles is very disarming and really encouraging, which is lovely, and then that leads to the second thing, which is this wonderful sense of hopefulness, because as you know, you're just talking about, I was fancy having the threat of I'm always 2 weeks away from black depression over you. I think that's a horrible place to be, whereas now
But see, at the time I was quite proud of it. 2 weeks, it's a long time.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you know, and that was the thing, is that there was never any pretense behind it. I thought that was as good as it could get. I honest to God, if you had told me, you know, the day will come where the idea of you being a depressive will seem funny to you, that wasn't even on the menu as far as I was concerned. And I think that's one of the things, is that there's a whole lot of stuff that's on the menu that we don't know is on the menu. And that's where the hope is. There's a whole lot. It can be so much easier, so much richer, so much better than you can imagine.
And that's incredibly... Sorry again. And that's incredibly freeing, isn't it? I mean, the sense of freedom you get from that is enormous.
Yeah, and for me, I would say the key to this understanding is that it's about freedom, not control. So much of what we look to is, how can I get more control over my feelings? How can I get more control over my life? How can I get more control over my relationships? This is about freedom. The freedom to feel great or feel bad and it be fine. The freedom to have things work your way or not work your way and it to be great.
Yeah.
And freedom, we're so not used to freedom.
Right. It almost seems to be the modern default to be in control, to have a plan, to have goals and all the rest of it. And this speaks to a much more natural...
Control is such a poor substitute for freedom. It's better than no control, but it's nothing compared to freedom.
And what do you think would tip the balance for people to leave their, you know, modern day complex control life, which they feel is, you know, they pay the price for it maybe, but they feel is success, to moving into this kind of...
The only thing is insight. Like the only thing that... Because if you try to will yourself into this understanding, that's just control again.
Right.
It's if something that you hear in this interview, right, if something that somebody reads in the book touches them, sparks just a glimmer of an insight, that's all it takes. And then if they look deeper, there's more to see.
So just the tiniest movement, and you're on your way.
And you're on your way. And it, you know, for some people, it's just, I don't know why, I just feel better after that. You know, I already, there are people carrying the book around. I said, I don't know why, but I just feel better. Well, it isn't the book. It's that what the book is pointing to has allowed their natural well-being to come up to the surface. And like, well, it must be the book. Well, it's not even the book. I mean, the book can be a useful pointer.
Right.
But what it's pointing to is already there.
So people are doing it, but the book can naturally, people do it naturally, everybody. But the book can give them an understanding of the principles, can give them...
I mean, you know, what I like to, the way I like to think of it is, what the book is showing is what's already happening that you're probably not noticing. That once you start to notice it, will change your relationship with life.
So, one of the big reason for doing this was to promote your book, because I thought it was so wonderful that everybody should know about it. And
Thank you.
but that's what we're here to do. But what else can they do with Michael Neill to?
Well, so we've created an online program to go with the book. It's called Living from the Inside Out.
Okay.
And so that's a series of video lessons with me where I go into more depth with the ideas in the book. And then there's an online community and there's monthly calls with me. So people can do that online. They can find it at, I don't know if we can, you want to include links or how you want to do it.
No, there'll be a link on the page.
So people can do that. For people who want to train in this, there's Coaching from the Inside Out, which is an online program. And then there's also, if you're really in, come on a retreat. We do Learning How to Thrive retreats three times a year. Come on Super Coach Academy if you want to learn to do this work. Come work with me.
Okay.
I do intensives, I work with private clients. I've got a fairly full schedule, but if you get on the calendar now, at some point, that day will show up.
Okay. Well, it's been wonderful to talk to you.
Yeah, it's been great.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And I hope that everybody's going to either buy the book or click on the link and start the Inside Out program and really start to make that little bit of difference that's going to take them on a fantastic journey to freedom. So thank you.
Thanks.
Now, can I just do a little bit more?
Yeah.
Do they mind?
You told them that?
I've ensconced them downstairs in
Excellent.
the kitchen.
Lovely.
They know where everything is.
Totally fine.
So the thing that okay. Just think about this as Desert Island Discs time.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever had a chance to do it.
Yeah, no, I've not done it, but I know
Okay.
it. Yeah.
So Desert Island Disc is like the 5 big things
Mm.
for you personally. And if I kind of say in your journey with the principles, what do you think were your big moments? And the last one I think would be lovely for you to say would be about where you think your next step is.
Okay. It's a fun question. I think the first one was definitely the one I write about in the book, where I really just got that everyone has innate mental health, innate well-being.
It sounds like it was a Charlton Heston moment.
It was. That was a Charlton Heston. That was a holy freaking mother of God. I mean, I literally snorted beer out of my nose. It was. I was laughing for 10 minutes. It was gorgeous and embarrassing at the same time.
Cool.
I think a second one for me was when I saw that I was trying so hard to figure out mind, thought, and consciousness as concepts, because I wanted to know whether or not it was worth my time to agree with them. And it dawned on me that was silly. And when I started to look behind the words, behind the concept of mind, I do have a sense of there being a larger energy that I'm a part of, a larger intelligent energy. Behind the idea or thought of definition of consciousness I'm aware of life. I've got this extraordinary capacity to experience anything. Behind the notion of thought there's this creative force, and it can, in 1 minute, life can look so hard, and the next minute it can look so easy, and then it can look so sad, and then it can look so great, and all that's changing is thought. And I could see the creative force at work. So that was another big jump when it went from conceptual to spiritual, to tangible.
Right.
A third one for me, this was huge, was I had a client who they were very scared of death, kept them up at night. And I was just learning the principles, and the only thing I could think of to say to them is, well, you don't have to think about it. If you don't think about it, you won't feel bad. And oddly, that kind of helped, but to me it felt like a cop-out.
Right.
It's like, yeah, well, it's true, but is that the best we can do? And I went to one of my mentors and I said, what would you do if you had a client who was obsessed with death and had anxiety about it? And she said, or I thought she said, well, I tell them they don't have to think about that. And that's what I said. And then I went back to her a couple hours later and I said, there's got to be a better answer. And she said, to what? I said, there's got to be something better than you don't have to think about that. She said, I didn't say that. I said, sure you did. I've got the notebook. I said, well, I get that's what you wrote down, but she said, I said, you don't have to think that. And that wasn't even a Homer Simpson moment. That was a moment where my entire sense of what was real started to dissolve, because I suddenly went, my thinking is entirely arbitrary. Like, why do I think these things are good and these things are bad? I don't have to think that. Why do I think this is scary and this is fun? I don't have to think that. And I saw just how made up my reality was. And as my world was melting, which was a little scary, I was just sitting there for about half an hour watching my concepts of life dissolve.
Right.
It was like 3 rocks were still there in the river. And, the energy of mind, the potential of consciousness, the gift of thought. And those 3 constants meant I didn't feel the need to hang on to concepts as constants. And that was huge for me. If I've got a fourth that comes to mind. I think the fourth for me has been really learning to rely more and more on this intelligent energy of mind. Learning that the difference between wisdom and dogma is everything. I use the analogy in one of my coaching tips about, there's the burning bush, there's Moses, and there's the stone tablets.
Right.
And we all are running around trying to find new things to inscribe on our stone tablets. And sometimes we even get them, we have a direct experience of well-being and wisdom. And then we want to go write it down so that we can follow what we wrote down, instead of looking back to, well, gee, how can I spend more time on fire with the truth without being consumed by it? How can I spend more time in my well-being and wisdom, as opposed to trying to follow what yesterday's wisdom told me today? I like the analogy of if you have a glass of milk from 10 years ago, and it was a really fresh glass of milk then, and a glass of milk from yesterday, or a fresh from the cow glass of milk today, which one are you going to drink?
Sure, today's.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is we've somehow learned to follow yesterday's wisdom, which is now a concept or a good idea, instead of staying in that flow of wisdom and realizing, I'll know what to say when I know what to say, I'll know what to do when I know what to do, and until then there's nothing I need to do. And you're going to that fifth one then. I think, for me, what's to come, it would be, I think it's just a deepening. I might be wrong, but I remember I loved in Dzogchen Buddhism. It's very different to Zen, and I mean, this is, what we're talking about isn't Buddhism, but I just think this is a good analogy. That in Zen Buddhism, it's like, you sit and you sit and you sit and you sit, and you hope one day you suddenly burst into enlightenment. In Dzogchen Buddhism, they try and give people an experience, a taste of enlightenment, as early in the process as possible, the view. And then all of Dzogchen from that point forward is increasing the depth, the purity, and the duration of that view. And that feels to me very analogous to the principles. That people get a taste, they get a burst of well-being, of clarity, of peace, of mind. And the reason you continue to study the principles is to increase the depth and the purity and the duration of that glimpse. And so that's all I know for now.
Perfect. So there already seems to me to be a huge kind of certainty and trust about you that I find really, really powerful.
Well, and what's really funny to me is, until you pointed that out, I didn't really notice. Like, I hadn't thought of it that way.
Okay.
It just, but it's true. but I get it.
Okay. And then the other thing I think that's really, really good here is that I sense an incredible lightness in you, as a human being, which I think is something that we'd all love to have. So seems to be some really pressing reasons to some really good reasons to do this.
Well, boy, I wish I mean, that I would love to have understood this, 30 years ago. But I'll take it. I mean, you know what? I don't think it matters when you get it.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing. I mean, I've talked to people in their 80s who suddenly, 86-year-old guy who suddenly got it, and it's like better then than never. But why wait?
So everybody can get it sooner.
Yeah,
that's the opportunity.
Yeah, well, that's the hope.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Mike.
Thank you.
Really good.
Pleasure.
Excellent.
Cool. Good.
Yay! Yeah, you happy with that?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. That felt like it flowed really nice, and I'm sure you can.
That was wonderful.
Eliminate everything that didn't later.
Well, maybe what we'll do is